A lot of NFL to get into, a lot of NFL news and notes. Lake Lewis does a great job covering the Redskins, the NFL, as well as NBA. He's all over the place. He's kind enough to join us on a Football Friday on our Boardwalk Honda hotline. What's going on, pal?
Hey, what's going on, man? Nice music coming in.
See, I knew.
Very nice.
See, I knew you would appreciate that. I mean, there's always a method behind the madness.
Yeah, I mean, that was a nice transition, just to hear some classic Stevie Wonder, and I was actually humming it myself.
Yes, yeah. Well, hopefully we get some classic playoff football this weekend. Let's start with the AFC side of the ball. I think for my money, on paper, the game of the weekend is going to be Jacksonville and Pittsburgh, with Jacksonville and that defense, and going into Pittsburgh, and you got Pittsburgh and their weapons, and Bell and Ben, and even though Brown's not 100%, I think if anything, Pittsburgh at home will have to try to find a way to instill their physical will against Jacksonville. But, man, I would not want to sleep on the Jags.
No, I think Jacksonville's a team that could actually really, turn the playoffs upside down. And if there ever were teams that were tailor-made for teams, Pittsburgh's style of play is tailor-made for Jacksonville's defense, as we saw earlier in the year where Ben Roethlisberger threw 5 interceptions against that Jacksonville defense, which is much better now, having played a full season together. So Jacksonville's coming in this game with a lot of confidence, and Pittsburgh is the better team, but I don't think this is a gimme game by any means.
No, I don't. And listen, if you're Pittsburgh, you sell out against the run, because you already know, okay, Blake, who knows if you're going to get the 3-week Blake Bortles in December, or you're going to get the Blake Bortles of last week. But if I'm Pittsburgh defensively, I sell out and say, go ahead, Blake, you got to beat us with your arm.
Yeah, you want to take Fournette out the game first and foremost. And, Bortles, I think Bortles is one of those guys now that's becoming a victim of the success of Jacksonville's defense. It's almost as if that defense is so good that people are taking credit from Bortles and their offense. But Jacksonville's offense is very efficient. They do what they have to do when they need to do it. And I think they're an offense that knows that if they don't turn the football over, their defense will put them in positions to, get some easy points. And also defense can get points for themselves. They had 2 pick-six against Pittsburgh early in the year in those 5 interceptions. So, again, this is a game that I definitely want to see. And, the other game I want to see is right up around you guys, the Eagles and Falcons. And, I talked to my good friend Philip Daniels, who's one of the D-line coaches for the Eagles, and, he's like, they don't want to keep hearing that they have no shot without Carson Wentz, and that they've changed some things, for Foles to basically run an offense that he's comfortable and not have to run the offense that Wentz has been running all year, and that's what Foles has been doing. So now they put some things in for him. So, I'm looking forward to this game, because I think the Eagles are going to try to turn this into an old-school brawl in order to get the win at the link.
2 things with that. They have to. And second of all, listen, the theme, the narrative all week, and I think it was created by a lot of the local, some of the local media. You hear these players. Listen, they're 13-3. The reason they're underdogs, right? The reason they're underdogs is because Carson Wentz is not playing. There's no disrespect here with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're a 13-3 team that won the East, that has home field advantage, that has the number 1 seed. Albeit they have to do it with a journeyman backup quarterback who's capable of winning the game. So, if they need to pump themselves up and play that, the us against the world card, so be it. The bottom line is this. You have to be able to get Atlanta. Well, first of all, they're going to have to run the ball. If they don't run the ball, then shame on them. But defensively, You get Atlanta in 3rd and long, and Schwartz can pin back that defense. You're not exposing the secondary as much, and you get after Ryan and you cause turnovers. I mean, to me, those are the keys of the game.
Right. You know what? You hit it right on the head. And, Atlanta's tackles aren't that good. I mean, let's just call it what it is. And the strength of the Eagles' defense is that pass rush. And you're right, Schwartz and company, they're gonna come after Matt Ryan. And Atlanta gets away from the run. This. And if they don't run Freeman, if they don't make a conscientious effort to run the football, they're going to be in trouble. And I'm taking the Eagles in this game. I think people have written the Eagles off, and I understand how important Wentz was. He's a true MVP candidate. But I think the Eagles, every time I saw this team, and, I saw them up close twice when they played the Redskins, and I was just impressed with what I saw was a group effort this year. It wasn't just Wentz. It was a lot of different pieces. I will say this, though. I do want to see more out of the running game.
You have to.
And if they can, if they can run the kid, that they brought in from Miami,
yep.
and Ajayi, and you can get Blunt running, between the tackles. If they can get that running game going, I think their defense is good enough to hold Atlanta down. And Julio Jones is hurting right now, really bad ankle. So I don't think you're going to see the vertical Julio Jones in this game. And I would be surprised if Schwartz knows to keep, he's got to keep everything in front of him anyway. So the Eagles are going to, I think they have a shot, a big-time shot to look impressive in this game.
And then you have in the other side of the ball in the NFC, you got Minnesota, and you have the Saints. And now, Washington played Minnesota. Was that away this year, or they played them at home?
I was here. It was here in D.C. and
Keenum had a pretty good game. I know he had a couple picks here and there, but listen, I love the way this kid has played, and it's a perfect fit for him. But they can run the ball. They have offensive weapons. I look at this game, and I just think two things. I look at this game. When I really break it down, I think they're going to roll out Case a ton. I think you're going to get him into play action. You roll him away from harm's way. Some dinks and dunks here and there. The Saints defense got better, but they're not on the same level as the Vikings defense. And as great as Drew Brees is, if you can't get that running game going, he's not going to have the same type of game he did last week against Carolina.
Yeah, there's a couple things here. I was looking into this, and when the Saints and Minnesota played earlier in the year, they played in Minnesota. Minnesota won by 7. And there was something in that game that kind of, if I'm a Vikings fan or supporter, I'm a little concerned. They won by 7 over the Saints earlier in the year in Minnesota, but in that game, which was started by Sam Bradford had like 390 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think he only had 2 incompletions on the game, and then on top of that, Dalvin Cook actually ran for like 130 yards, and they only won by 7. So what I'm saying is, if I were to ask you right now, Q, do you expect that kind of offensive output from Minnesota this week? You're probably going to tell me no. There's no way that they're going to get 500 yards of total offense. So with that said, this game is going to be a game that's going to be closer than maybe some even think. I think Minnesota's a 6-point favorite. If you're a Saints supporter, you actually like this because the Saints running game now, I think in that game, earlier in the year, Adrian Peterson led them in carries, and I think he had like 40 yards. So the point I'm making is now you have, the two-headed monster they have in the backfield, Ingram and Nakamura. So, I'm looking at this game where this is a game that the Saints could win. I am taking the Vikings, but I think it's going to be one of those last-second field goal type games.
Lake Lewis joining us on a Football Friday on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Great follow on Twitter at Lake Lewis, covers the Washington Redskins, PFW Writers Association as well, and of course does a bunch of radio across the country as well as TV. Tennessee and New England, for me, it's pretty simple. If you can't get to Brady, if you can't force turnovers and shorten up the game, everyone believes this would be that blowout of the weekend. Again, there's no guarantees in life, but I just think if you're Tennessee, you're playing with house money. Who knows if Mariota is going to scramble all over the place? And if you can get Henry going, that's great. But you got to limit those possessions by New England.
Yeah, excuse I think this game comes down to just New England's going to have too much. They're going to. Tennessee is a viable opponent, but you go back to last week and the way they won their game. Talking about Tennessee. To me, that was more of a Kansas City meltdown.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's not to take credit from Tennessee because you still,
got to come back from 18. Yeah, sure.
Right, exactly. But Kansas City, I mean, they just can't win at home in the playoffs. I think they're 0-6 in their last 6 home games. And my God, Andy Reid, you guys know up there, he just, whatever happens in the playoffs, it's just the worst outcome. So Tennessee, you're right. They feel good about themselves. They're playing with house money, but they're going into a house of horrors right now. And Teams just don't beat New England in the playoffs. I think the Ravens may have been the last team to do so, but this is going to be a tough game for Tennessee, and they're going to have to keep this score close. They're going to have to keep it low. Basically, if New England gets 20 points, they win the game, and I don't see how Tennessee's defense keeps them from doing that.
With all this weekend's amazing because think about it. If Keenum plays well and they get to championship game or they get to Super Bowl winning, he's going to make money, whether he follows Shermer or not. You got 2 free agent quarterbacks pending as well with Minnesota and Bradford and Teddy Bridgewater. You got the Kirk Cousins issue in Washington. You have if Bortles falters, who knows? Everyone thinks right away it's got to be Eli. Well, they still have to hire a head coach. I guess my point is the effect that we might see if, say, a Bortles falters or Keenum plays well, it really affects where some of these other impending free agents and some of these quarterbacks are going to go this offseason and potentially different teams next year.
Well, Q, that's a great point. And, I know a couple guys on Jacksonville's team and talked to a couple of them, and they told me verbatim they love Blake Bortles in that locker room. So it's not a situation where the players don't like the guy. They were like, he's one of them. And I think that goes a long ways. This is a team that maybe even are a year ahead of schedule. I think most people thought the Texans would be the better team in the division. So Jacksonville's kind of a year ahead, and you get back next year and Allen Robinson, who's a big playmaker who was lost, I think, in the first game of the year, second game of the year for them. You start to get more of your pieces back in place, and I don't see why you would get rid of a guy that has orchestrated your team being part of that, getting them to the playoffs. And also, I don't understand why you would get rid of a young guy for an old guy that maybe 1 or 2 years left in his career, and that's talking about Eli Manning, as great as he's been. I get the Coughlin connection and all of that stuff, but that doesn't make sense to me at all. What makes sense is Eli finishing his career in New York, actually, and Bortles staying where he is. You talk about Cousins and that situation. Well, I've said this before. I think Kirk Cousins' options are dwindling. I think they're dwindling by the day, and I'm not saying he's going to be here because I don't think he's going to be in D.C., but I'm saying this. He has a better shot to stay here in D.C. than he did a month ago because we're talking about Bortles. If he wins, he stays.
How about Arizona?
Anyway.
How about Arizona?
I think Arizona, could be a good fit, but who's their coach? It's so many different variables right now, that Cleveland is another team that comes up. And I'll say this, if you're going to take money and go to Cleveland, then you need to go. And I'll be the first.
I know what you're saying because you don't want to win.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Saying this whole song and dance here about I want to be a part of something special. I want to be somewhere where the goal is to win, be a first-class organization. You name it. Well, scratch Cleveland off the list then.
Yeah.
if that's going to be your narrative, you have history here. You have a system that I will say this, and I've taken some heat in this market for saying this. For everything Kirk has done, which is great, he's been a really good person. I'll give him that. A great locker room. Well, you don't see him much in the locker room, but when you do, he's always been accommodating to all of us in the media. But I will say this. This system has helped make Kirk Cousins. Let's not fool ourselves here. Jay Gruden's system has produced 4,000-yard quarterbacks in their sleep. His rookie, Andy Dalton's rookie year was with Jay Gruden in Cincinnati. He threw for 4,000 yards and went to the playoffs. So all I'm saying to you is that you've seen what Andy Dalton has done since Jay Gruden has taken the Redskins job. And this isn't to throw shade or salt on any player or coach for that matter, but I think Kirk Cousins may need the Redskins more than he realizes.
A couple more before I let you get out of here. Great stuff as always. I guess this is we can finally say we don't have to worry about Gruden if he's going to be a head coach or not. It's a done deal, right? I mean, how many years have we been saying that?
Thank God.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I still have people popping up on my timelines. You coming to Miami still? You coming to Miami?
I thought it was Tampa. Miami. Yeah. But let me ask you something.
I did my job, man.
I know. I remember you took a lot of heat for that. I remember that. Listen, what if though there was a a quote-unquote handshake while Del Rio was still the head coach and Gruden was still broadcasting a couple games. Is it a big deal or not?
Yeah, it definitely is a big deal because that's not the way things are supposed to be done. However, you and I both know that's done all the time.
Of course it is.
As an owner of anything, you know what direction you want to take, whatever your establishment is, and you know who you want to lead. And that's why I've said, as a black man, I personally have always taken offense to the Rooney Rule, and some people don't understand that. So let me explain. It should never have to be in place, because what that means is that there's a problem with minority hiring. So therefore, there's the reason why it has been in place. But let's be honest, people have used that in a mockery way. I mean, they've interviewed their own staff that they knew that they were going to fire at the end of the year with an outgoing coach. So they'll interview, two minority candidates or a minority candidate who's already in-house during the season when they know that all those coaches are lame duck coaches. So don't tell me it was to get a really good idea if that guy can coach or not. No, it was to get the Rooney Rule out the way, so as soon as you fire that guy and his staff, you know what coach you're going to pluck. And that's exactly what the Raiders did. It's bad. I mean, but
hey, listen,
what are you gonna do?
Eagles. Listen, there was talk a couple years ago when Eagles they interviewed Deuce Staley. A lot of people thought the NFL was like, okay, you guys are trying to manipulate the rule here. So I mean, and you bring up some very good points.
I mean, I don't think every owner does that.
Oh,
manipulate the system.
No, not suggesting that.
Let's look at Pittsburgh. I mean, I don't think when they interviewed Mike Tomlin back in the day that anybody thought Mike Tomlin was going to get the Steelers job, not because he's black or anything, just because he was young and had never coached as a head coach. And that's a storied franchise that had only had up until that point 2 head coaches in their history. So, for him to be given that job, a lot of people were upset because he was young. I don't think it was because of his race. I mean, if there were people upset because of his race, listen to something else right now. You're not wanted here. But the point is, it was because he was young.
Right.
That's what that was.
Right.
But we saw what he's done since then. He's become one of the best coaches in the league. So, again, the whole Rooney Rule thing, the principle of it and the morality of it is excellent. But I do think people circumvent how you can get around it. And I think the Raiders probably were one that did it. And I'll be the first to say this. Just throw the race stuff down. They got a hell of a hire. I mean, you're moving into Vegas soon. You want to sell out, the venue there. It's probably going to be one of the best venues in the league, if not the best. What better person to handpick that has history and a past with you, and you won with the guy?
How goofy was it watching St. John's and Georgetown the other night with Chrissy Mullins and then the big man in the middle on the sidelines? I tweeted that at you. And I was ticked off that St. John's lost the game. They haven't won a Big East game, but that's besides the point.
Of course. It made me feel very, very, very old.
Yeah.
That's what it made me. That's what it made me feel, because I remember
85, 86.
watching those guys.
Yeah.
I remember going to school at Georgetown and just seeing all that historical stuff. And now I'm like, man, that's ancient times.
I know.
Guess what else is ancient? Me.
We both are, my friend. We both are. So, hey, real quick before I let you get out of here, I just saw this. And it's so funny, and I know we're tight on time, so I'll make it fast. I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about when myself, you, Philip, we had Niles there. I think Chris Thompson showed up when we did Tori Nelson against Mia St. John, and I totally forgot that Tori Nelson's fighting tonight. She's fighting tonight against Clarissa Shields.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tweeted her this morning, told her,
okay,
good luck, and it's on Showtime too.
Yeah, it is on Showtime. Yeah, which good for them to get that type of. But I was just thinking about it when we were all doing the fight and we were all talking over each other.
So she got this is. I mean, listen, this is she's older now. But
I know.
This is her opportunity to just I mean, she's you and I both know she's heavily the underdog in this fight.
Yeah, but she also beat Alicia Napoleon, who's a very good fighter who was undefeated at the time in New York. So again, yeah, she goes in as a big time underdog. You're right, but I think it's great for female boxing.
Yeah, Shields has never knocked anyone out either, and I think people need to keep that in perspective too, because Tori is a knockout artist.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting fight, an entertaining fight. So we're people here in Ashburn are excited for Tori to see her get an opportunity.
Hey, we know
because that is a class act woman right there.
We know when she fought Mia. Mia collected her check, and that was pretty much that fight was over in 2 rounds.
She sure did. You had the greatest call of all time.
I don't know about that.
Steve Smoker. It was that Steve Smoker. That's it. And
That's it. That's it.
You
had to. She
doesn't know where she is right now.
She did.
Yes,
She knew where she went to go collect it to cash the check, and I'll just leave it at that. All right, my friend. Great stuff as always. Listen, we'll talk next week. Appreciate it as always. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games, bud.
All right, take care, man.
You got
Appreciate it.
All right, Lake Lewis.